Welcome to Stash to Stitches. My name is Michelle and I am from the rural part of Mpumalanga in South Africa. I'm an avid knitter, crocheter, sometimes weaver, sewist, and I hope to become a proficient spinner one of these days. But I have a problem. I am drowning in yarn. Just to give you an idea of the stats, I have 68.5 kilograms of yarn. That is more than 150 pounds of yarn. This I recently discovered when reorganizing my craft room and coming across bags and bags and bags of yarn. So what I've done, I've loaded everything onto Ravelry and decided I'm just going to establish exactly how bad the damage is. And then I was to come up with a plan. So I have 68.5 kilograms of yarn, which amounts to 685 and a half 100-gram balls of yarn, and 1,371 50-gram balls of yarn. So I've decided it's time to reduce my stash. I am attempting to only use yarn from my current stash and not to buy any more. Obviously, I don't need any more, which is the premise of this podcast, is to keep me accountable and to encourage me to keep on going, even when I see about a lovely yarn sale from a store that a friend shared with me yesterday. So my plans are to use my stash and to track exactly how much yarn I use per project to see these numbers go down. For me, it makes the most sense to count them in 50-gram balls of yarn, because most of my stash consists of 50-gram balls. I used to mostly or exclusively use natural fibers, but I've realized I do actually have a need for acrylics as well, because it's very hot where we live. Our winters typically last from June until mid-August. But even saying that, only our nights and early mornings are really cold. Our average daytime temperature is between 25 and 28, 29 degrees Celsius, which, if I'm not mistaken, is between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit on an average winter's day, which means I struggle to wear sweaters that are made even in 100% merino. Simply gets too hot. And also most of my colleagues get cold quickly, so they tend to turn up the heat, and I then am sweltering. So I've realized I do have a need. I find acrylics aren't as warm, especially because I normally wear something underneath. So you will see I've embraced the acrylics I do have in my stash, and I intend on using them as well. Having said that, in order to get started, I'll show you the projects I've finished. I'm currently wearing my Muriel blouse, which seems to be a trending pattern. I notice it's been on the most viewed on Ravelry for quite a number of weeks, I suppose. I absolutely love this pattern. It's this beautiful lace detailing, a very memorable pattern, and the same lace pattern is repeated throughout. Some of my South African friends might recall our grandmothers wearing an undergarment for heat. They used to refer to them as spencers. And as far as I recall, my grandmother always bought hers at Woolworths. Now this reminds me so much of that classic pattern. It's absolutely beautiful. It's knit up in a local yarn called Merino by Owl, and it was so affordable. I bought it approximately 3 or 4 years ago already. I initially started the project in this green, and then when I started reorganizing my stash, I came across this pink again, and I was about halfway with the back yoke. It's not really a yoke, but the back top part of my sweater when I realized, you know what, this pattern is actually, this pink yarn is ideal for this pattern. So I frogged what I had in green and I restarted, and I'm so pleased I did. This green actually turned out, when worked, it looked a bit darker and a bit duller, where this just looks, this pastel pink is absolutely beautiful. It seems that this pattern was made for this color. So I'm really, really pleased. I've discovered, even though in the past I used to like really bright, vibrant rainbow colors, it seems that these days pastels are more a go-to. For me, it seems to suit me better. So this was made in Al Merino in the color Magnolia. I'm really pleased with it, although I do have two issues. You'll see me constantly tugging at the neckline. I feel that the neckline goes slightly too high for me and it gets too close to my throat. And also, you might notice, I think it's about here, it's a folded over neckline. And when I folded it over, I must have gotten my stitches twisted slightly. Not twisted is the wrong word, I suppose, when talking knitting. But you'll see it doesn't follow a natural line towards the inside. So when I sewed in my ends, I very specifically did not sew in this end because I was concerned about the height of the neckline. So I need to redo that today. I was thinking maybe if I just reduce the number of rounds in my neckline, that might already increase this choky feeling I get. It's not too bad, but I don't constantly want to be tugging at it either. I thought I might be able to sort it out by blocking. It did relax the neckline slightly, but not quite to my particular preference. And then the sleeves turned out a little bit too long. I'm trying to let you see. There you go. I knew that the lace would... Sorry, I'm just trying to get myself back in the frame properly. There you go. I knew that the lace would drop down a little bit, the lace would grow, but it grew slightly more than I anticipated, especially because the sleeves are so wide, which I really, really like. It's not something I've gotten a difference in any other of my sweaters. I usually have the sleeves decrease, but this one didn't. I really like how wide the sleeves are. I might have to shorten them slightly, but I'll wear the sweater around the house today and decide exactly what I need to do. This pattern used 685 grams of yarn, which is 13.4 grams of yarn. Then the second project I finished. This is something I'd been eyeing for a few years already, and I could just never find the yarn. I really like the tweed effect that was used on the project, on Ravelry's project page. So I could just never find what I was looking for. And I fairly recently, before I started this mad de-stash, or shopping from my stash, I saw this Heirloom quilt cardigan pattern, which is made up with these blocks, which are very, very reminiscent of quilt blocks. And it is the same block pattern that is repeated throughout in different colors. And then you sew them all together, knit the sleeves, the neckband, and the bottom ribbing. Now, when I tried mine on, it was way, way, way too big. It is supposed to be a boxy, oversized pattern, but I found it ridiculous that my sleeves started in my elbow. So what I ended up doing, I ended up removing one row of blocks from the back and one row from each of the fronts, which meant I needed slightly more fabric. So I ended up knitting this ribbing portion to half the width of the blocks on each side. And then when I did my neckband, I did the corrugated ribbing on the fronts just to give it a bit more color. I didn't want as much brown on the front, and then the brown for the ribbing at the bottom. And the pattern on Ravelry had different colors sleeves, so I did that as well, and I actually really enjoy that. I find this very fun. I suppose that's what happens in your 40s. You find different colored sleeve or different colored sleeves amusing. And then just for my bind off, I used a pop of color again, which I think turned out particularly well. And I tend to forget about it, and then when I do see it, I find it really, really really fun again, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. So this is my Heirloom quilt cardigan, which was knit in Karoo tweed, also a yarn by Ull. I've never used as much Ull in my life. It comprises of 87% acrylic, 10% wool, and 3% rayon or viscose. I've already indicated the adjustments I've made, and this used 650 grams of yarn with 13 balls of yarn. Then I have a 3-year-old daughter, and she's always extremely intrigued when I take out my yarn, and she always wants to help. So I've decided, considering the amount of yarn I had left from my Heirloom quilt cardigan, I would make her something similar, or in similar yarns and similar colors. I didn't want to knit as big squares for her because she's quite small. Even though she's 3 years old, she still wears smaller clothes. So I ended up crocheting blocks for her, and she's obsessed with flowers at this stage. So I knit these daisy granny squares in the same colors as my cardigan, which turned out really pretty. She seems to really like it. And then I knit the sleeves, the neckbands, and the bottom of the sweater. Something has happened here. Somebody has recently discovered scissors, and this looks to be her work. Luckily, I caught this before she did. I'll be able to fix that. She's only worn it twice. She's really pleased with it. She calls this her matchy-matchy. And she asks me that we wear our matchy-matchy, so then we wear our matching sweaters. She looks absolutely lovely in this. I'll just make sure to put this to one side. I don't know whether you can see this hole. Can't see what's happened. I'll be able to fix it. And I better do it before she gets home from school today. Her matchy-matchy cardigan used 216 grams of yarn, which is just over 4 balls of yarn. Then one night, while my daughter was at her grandparents' for a sleepover, my husband and I had a braai, which is a barbecue for my international friends, and it was cold. Now, I couldn't find any of my beanies. They were still put away from last winter. But I also beanies don't particularly suit me. Then, just before that, I'd seen on another podcast, I think it's Nanrissa Makes, she'd shown her Harris hood. I was quite intrigued by this. It looked absolutely lovely. And I thought this might be a solution to my face not being suitable for beanies. I've got quite a large head and I have a lot of hair, even though it's cut short at this point. So beanies just don't work. So I decided that Saturday night to cast on this hood. My gauge was slightly off. My gauge was larger than was called for. But as I have a big head, I thought I'll just give it a go. So the hood is slightly larger than it was supposed to be. So I really like the fabric and I decided not to go down. And I am really, really pleased with it. It wears beautifully. It's extremely comfortable. And it just keeps the cold off my ears, especially now that my hair is shorter. I always used to have really long hair. Now that my hair is shorter, I need that bit of extra heat. And I especially like that it also goes around your neck at the bottom. And then the bottom really goes nicely into a sweater or something that you're wearing. So it really keeps out the cold. I'm really pleased with it. And I used yarn that was already in my stash. What I also enjoyed, I started this on the Saturday night. And by Sunday night when I went to bed, I only had the last bit of ribbing to do. And then the bind off, which you do a 3-needle bind off basically onto the front covering. And had to weave in my end. So this was a really quick project and a really great palette cleanser. And then when my mom saw it, she said, you know what, your dad would really like one. They were about to go camping in Botswana. And it is the middle of our winter here. So I ended up knitting him one as well, which he seemed to be really pleased about. He wore it the whole time we were visiting them when we gifted it to him for Father's Day. His is in a slightly darker color, and for his I reduced the numbers of stitches slightly to get more the kind of size that the pattern intended. He seemed to be really pleased about it. I've asked my mom to take a picture of him while they were camping, and I'll ask to find out whether she actually did. Now, if they did, I might be able to add it on here. The Harris hood used 135 grams of yarn each. So that is a total of 270 grams, 2.7 balls of yarn for both of these hoods. I plan on knitting my husband one as well, and then my daughter said that she would like one as well, so I bought her a pink. She's pink obsessed all of a sudden, and I'll just have to figure out how much smaller to make it for her. But luckily she's usually around, so I'll be able to try it on and see as we go. But I do intend on making her one as well. I have the yarn in my stash for it already. Then, just to give you a quick idea of what I'm currently working on. I'm working on the doppio sweater. I'm sorry, I just dropped a sleeve here. Let me just pick that up. There you go, which is a knit pattern. I don't crochet as much anymore. I'm not crazy about crochet wearables. I find the garments to be a bit too thick and too stiff for my liking. I much prefer knitting garments. But I do enjoy crocheting, especially as I'm working to finish my next project. So I do still crochet, and I've realized I actually enjoy it more than I remembered. But first, I'm working on the doppio sweater, which is a raglan style in a bulky yarn. For this, I'm using Katupu's bulky yarn. Sorry, let me just take off. I've got a bit of fluff there. In the same color as the hood, coincidentally. I really enjoyed knitting in that color, and I thought, oh, this would make a lovely sweater. And when going through my stash, I realized I had more of this color yarn than I thought. What I particularly like about this pattern is how quickly it works up. I started this last Wednesday. Today is Monday. And I've already split for the sleeves. I'm probably about halfway done, maybe a third of the way done with the body. I just need to decide. This pattern is written with ribbing at the bottom, but I'm considering doing a folded over hem just in plain stockinette. But we'll see how it goes, because if I do that on the bottom of the sweater, I think I'll need to do that on the sleeves as well. And I haven't yet figured out whether I'll have slim sleeves on this or whether it will be wider sleeves that just are tightened with the ribbing at the cuff. I'm not sure, so I'll see how that goes. I think when I've done the body to the length I'd like, I might knit the sleeves and see what kind of end I'd like before, or what kind of cuff I'd like before I do the bottom of the sweater. What I found really interesting, this pattern is written that if you want, you add faux raglan, a faux seam for the raglan. So I've decided to do that and see how it goes. It's also got a faux seam on the sides. So I've decided that's something I haven't done before. I'll try that. I'm really pleased with this, and I'm really excited to get it done, to get some wear out of it while we still have cold evenings. We spend a lot of time outside, and over the weekend we spend a lot of time around the braai, the barbecue, even in the winter. In fact, it's my favorite time to do that. The favorite time of year to do that. Then my next project is a crochet project. When going through the stash, I thought, oh, I have another crate of yarn to go through. And then I discovered about 120 of these Starburst granny blocks, which I'd completed, and I had to go and look, about 16 years ago. And I just never ended up working them, sewing them together. And I think what had happened, I'd bought enough yarn, it looks like, for our king size bed. But completing these or repeating these blocks became so tedious, I just could not do it anymore. Which I've realized now that I've finished the last few of the blocks. I think I've got about 10 to go to make this a blanket for my daughter for not quite the length of a single bed, but she'd be able to use it in bed at night if she wants to. She's really pleased with it. She's really pleased with the colors, and I find this to be absolutely beautiful. I've started working some of the blocks together again, just as a bit of a break in between the repetition of the blocks, and I hope to have this finished within the next fortnight or so. I don't know whether I'll quite have the border done by then, but I'm considering a simple granny border, maybe in this natural color, with just the pops of color in between. Sorry, I don't know quite how to describe it, but I'll see what I get and I'll show you once I decide what I'm going to do. And then finally, these are not all of my whips. If you have 65 or 68 kilograms of yarn, I think it goes to, it's a natural conclusion that you also have lots of whips, which I do. I've realized what I tend to do, I like knitting the part of the pattern that you need to focus on slightly more, the tops with increases, interesting lace patterns. But then if I do have a stockinette bit of knitting to do and you just knit in the round for the body, I find that really tedious. So I tend to put these projects to the side, and then maybe I finish them, maybe I don't. So I will just show you the ones that I'm actively working on. This is the Stockholm slip over v-neck by Petite Knit. Join to knit in the round. I was a bit concerned the sleeve opening at the bottom, not the sleeve, but it seemed to go a bit low. So on the one side I've already done my ribbing on the sleeve just to see whether that closes the gap a bit, and it actually does. So I tend to we visit my parents every Wednesday evening. We have dinner with them. And I usually take this along to work by them. I don't need to think about it. I can just knit in the round. So I've joined in the round. This seems to go really slowly, but I think it's just because it's the stockinette, which is a lot of repetition. I'm about 5 centimeters from knitting in the round under the arms. So I'll get this done fairly quickly as well. This is also knit in the Karoo Tweed by Elle. I love how light this yarn is. It's a double knit weight, but it is so light and airy. So I'm really pleased. I don't have any vests. No, actually, no, I don't have any completed vests in my wardrobe. So I'm quite looking forward to this with a white blouse underneath, which means I'll need to get out my sewing machine and see what I can do to get a shirt to wear underneath this. But this is really pretty as well. I quite like the light tweed, gives it a bit of interest. So I'm really pleased with this as well. And that is it. Those are the projects I'd intended on showing you today. Now, just to give you a stash wind up, or a stats wind up, which I suppose could be a stash wind up, the Marielle blouse used 685 grams of yarn. The Heirloom quilt cardigan, 650 grams of yarn. My daughter's matchy cardigan, 216 grams of yarn. And then my Harris hood, 135 grams of yarn. And my dad's Harris hood, 135 grams of yarn, which means that I've used a total of 1,821 grams of yarn, which is 1.8 kilograms of yarn, which means remaining in my stash 66.3 kilograms of yarn, or 1,338 balls, 50-gram balls of yarn. So, until next time, may your yarn never tangle. You win every round of Yarn Chicken. Your stitches be even, and may your stash become something beautiful. See you soon. Bye.